Hello, everyone, and welcome. Oh no, I can't do things. Hold on. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ninth episode of Inside the Criminal Mind, where I review a selection of Criminal Minds episodes, break down the criminology and victimology, and how these behaviors could have potentially been prevented. This episode covers season 3, episode 5, named 7 Seconds. As always, I will start with an introduction as someone new may be dropping in or seeing this episode first. So then I will do a synopsis of the episode to establish that everyone is familiar with what I'm going to be reviewing. Then I will cover the criminology and victimology relevant to the characters in this episode. Then I will go over how this behavior could have been prevented, and then, of course, a conclusion. So, if this is your first time, hi, I'm Sharissa. You might know me as Eradication Writer on Instagram or Eradication Lady on Twitter. You might know me from Discord, but if that's the case, then you know me as Sharissa. My mental health journey is very complex, very unique, but whose isn't? Everybody's experiences with mental health, mental illness, and so on and so forth is very unique because no path is the same. But my mental health journey was a major rosebud to basically how I decided to start doing things like this because I have a lot of trauma myself, childhood trauma, on through my adolescence, and then even as a young adult, I faced a lot of different types of trauma. And a lot of it was due to even my own doing, my own actions, my own behaviors because of the previous traumas that I had endured. So it's a very important type of conversation that I feel like a lot of people should be having because, whenever you go through life as a child or adolescent and you don't have proper guidance and you don't have those safe spaces, you don't have those coping mechanisms, whenever you enter adulthood, you end up making questionable choices that could basically cause your life to self-destruct. And whenever I had that type of like epiphany, like that like awakening moment where I was like, wait, like I can control all of this. It's all up to me. It kind of everything just clicked and it made sense. So that leads into my mission, which is to normalize and destigmatize mental health conversations, talk about psychological principles that can actually help solve societal issues that we see, like with gender roles. Why do we have gender roles? That's stupid. So that's, my own experiences through mental health and mental illness and trauma and anything related to that has really inspired me to make my mission my number one life goal, to basically help everybody who has had issues with mental health or mental illness, or people who have endured trauma, or people who just need support and guidance. That's why I became a wellness coach. So why Criminal Minds? Why should I use Criminal Minds to open up these topics? Why should we discuss this? Well, because criminal behavior can be related to societal issues. Remember what I said? How things that you endured as a child and adolescent, if you don't learn the proper coping mechanisms to function in an adult life, you could end up making questionable adult choices that will literally destroy your life. So criminal behavior can be related to societal issues. Examples of behavior and multiple perspectives. This show provides so many different examples of like how we can look at things. Well, like just because, like these criminals in this show are horrible, they did horrible things. But let's look at how that happened. Like how does a pedophile become a pedophile? How does a homicidal psychopath become a homicidal psychopath? Now, there are versions of people who are just born as a bad seed. If you haven't seen like the really old movie called The Bad Seed, check it out and then watch the new one because apparently there's a new one. I haven't seen it yet. But There are those cases too, but majority of the time, it's from experience. People end up doing bad things because of experiences that they've had and they never learned otherwise. So that's one of the reasons why I feel like Criminal Minds is a really, really good example of that. Sorry, my lips are dry. So, trigger warning. Before I get into this, I do want to express that there is a trigger warning for this episode. I'm going to start, hopefully, remembering to do trigger warnings before I actually go into the synopses of each episode, because I did realize that some of these things might be a little hard to hear. And they could have themes that you might have personally experienced yourself. And for that reason, I will prepare people by giving a trigger warning. This one references child sexual abuse, so I just want to put that out there. So this episode opens in the middle of a crowded mall with two parents frantically looking for their child. The mall is placed on lockdown and law enforcement comes in, especially since there was a case the week before where a child was kidnapped from the mall and killed within an hour of being kidnapped. Now, like I said, we all know that usually most of the time whenever I do these episodes, it's usually like a continuation of an episode from previously. I think that that's what this episode with this case was like either the episode before this or a few episodes before this. There might have been, there was probably an episode that was referencing what they're talking about. Sorry, my arm itches. Anyway, so this little girl, her name is Katie, was with her aunt named Susan, her uncle named Richard, and her cousin named Jeremy. Because the aunt was going to buy, or Susan was going to buy Richard a birthday gift, apparently. The cousin, Jeremy, was supposed to be watching Katie as he played games in the arcade when she went missing. Initially, Agent Morgan and Agent Reed questioned Jeremy. Dr. Reed was able to tell that Jeremy was hiding something, which didn't come out until later on in the episode. Because when he was answering their questions, you could tell there was he had a facial expression. He was chewing on the inside of his cheek, which is something that Dr. Reed brought and mentioned in a later interview with Jeremy. After putting a few clues together, they were able to pinpoint that Richard has been grooming Katie. And basically molesting her. We don't know how long exactly. There's not really any discussion of exactly how long. We do know that Katie is 6 years old. His wife, Susan, was covering for him. She knew about it. She knew that he was doing these things. And since she had once worked in the same mall that they were at, this was basically a whole ploy. This was a whole plot to get rid of her, to get rid of Katie, the 6-year-old. So she covered, or Susan, was came up with this whole plan. She ended up gagging her and, putting tape over her mouth and binding her together and putting her in some closet type of thing somewhere in the back, in the how malls are, and there's little employees only spaces. That's kind of where she had them, but she was in a closet. So the aunt and uncle eventually were both arrested. Katie was found. She was not breathing. There was no pulse when they found her, but they were able to revive her. So the motive behind this initially confused me. I didn't quite understand if they were trying to kill her or what exactly they were trying to do. Why hide her if the whole focus was that Richard was sexually molesting her. It's 11/11. But yeah, so it kind of confused me at first, but then after a while and after I kind of read through the fandom page a little bit, I understood it a little bit better, and I was like, yes, okay. So we're going to get into this. Let's get into it. So the criminology on Richard and Susan is that they did not have a good marriage. Inevitably, based on Richard's pedophilia, he had been sexually abusing Katie for long enough hold on. Yeah, for long enough for her to have developed these behaviors that sexually abused victims usually have. For example, Richard knew more about her than his own son's life. Whenever they were questioning Richard, they were asking her all these questions about Katie. He knew all the answers, but then they were asking questions about Jeremy, and he had absolutely no idea. Katie is his niece, so it's a little weird, like how come you know more about little Katie over here, who's your niece, who doesn't even live with you, but you know absolutely nothing about your son, who literally lives with you. Little weird, little weird. He also gifted Katie an extravagant necklace. And it's not like one of those cute little necklaces that you usually get for children that have some sort of really caring type of value. This is a necklace that looked very extravagant, not something that you would give to a child. It was a very romantic type, looking of necklace, like real gold, real gemstones type of thing. And it's a little weird. She's 6. What is a 6-year-old going to be doing with an extravagant necklace? So Susan, Richard's wife, grew tired and jealous, basically, of her niece, causing this rift in her marriage. So she planned to fix the situation. Binding and gagging her severely asthmatic niece and stowing her away in the mall basically caused her to go into distress. And she either slipped into a coma or died. And so this was a very, it's extreme to me. I could not understand. I just really could not understand how someone could be like, I know my husband's a pedophile, but, it was weird. It just didn't hit the spot for me. So these real life comparisons for these, if you are interested in looking them up, for Susan Jacobs, her real life counterpart would be Susan Smith, and Sue Edwards, and for Richard, it'd be Richard Allen Davis. So if you want to look those up, Susan Smith, Sue Edwards, Richard Allen Davis. Those are all real life comparisons to these real life unsubs in this episode of Criminal Minds. So as far as the victimology goes, and I always like to preface this with I know that, I'm not a victim blaming sort at all. And so whenever I'm saying how this could have prevented, there's always going to be a gray area. There's absolutely nothing that is 100% absolute, because everything is fluid. So Katie was a sexual abuse victim based on her bedwetting habits and marked up mutilated Barbies. She was only about 6 years old. So these are types of behaviors that parents could be on the lookout for. If, especially, because it's really not, I don't know. I'm kind of talking myself in circles at this point, but the victimology is there. We know that sexual abuse causes certain types of behaviors. And I know even in the DSM-5, whenever you're talking about PTSD, there are specific type of markers that you can look out for. And some of these, at least whenever you're coming to sexual abuse, the mutilated Barbies is a huge sign of, sorry, there's a cat hair stuck on my computer. Okay. There are, basic signs. Whenever you see a child mutilating their Barbies, you usually, that's their extension of themselves. If they see themselves as not being pretty, or if they're ugly or anything like that, they'll usually take that out on their Barbies, because that's the extensions of themselves. Bedwetting, usually that's pretty common in childhood. I know a lot of parents look at that and they're like, oh, well, that's common and it happens. Sometimes accidents happen. But then if it's a habit and it's happening all the time, and especially after that they've been potty trained and it's been years between since they've been potty trained and the bedwetting habits, then that's possibly a sign that something's going on. So let's move forward. So let's look at how we can potentially prevent this type of behavior. So with Richard and Susan Jacobs, there's not really much historical data released within the episode that shows how their criminal behavior could have been prevented. However, for Richard, if we find the root of his pedophilia, you might be able to find some answers there. There are so many things that could cause the idea of pedophilia in someone's mind, particularly if he had experienced some things in his early childhood, that could definitely be one of the main stressors. I forgot that I had notes here. So for Richard, the issue to face would be the pedophilia. If the answer for obsessions were revealed, then we could potentially know how this behavior could have been prevented. For Susan, it's finding the why over why her answer was to take out Katie. Fandom claimed that Susan just couldn't get herself to acknowledge that Richard was a pedophile. And that's something that just really bothers me personally. Maybe that's because of my own personal bias and my own personal experience with parents. But Susan had this weird thing. She felt like she needed to get rid of Katie in order to repair her marriage. Even though her husband was a pedophile, taking Katie out isn't going to solve the issue. As a matter of fact, it's just probably going to exacerbate it, and it's probably going to make it even more blown out of proportion. He's probably actually going to kidnap an actual child, somebody's actual child, instead of his own brother's child, which, I mean, I'm not saying that one is worse than the other or better than the other, because it's not, but it's just going to keep going. Like, if they had successfully done something like that and took out Katie, like, what about the next child? Because there's always going to be a next one, especially if his problem were to go unannounced. Thankfully, we don't have to worry about that because they were both arrested in the end. So, for Katie, there's not much that we could have prevented. Maybe the parents could have advocated better for her or been more aware of those not normal signs. Were Katie's basic emotional needs being met? This brings me to my humanistic perspective using Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When you look at the hierarchy of needs, it's a pyramid, or it's a triangle, and you have the absolutely most basic needs as the foundation of the pyramid. And if those foundational needs aren't being met, then Katie's not going to be able to transcend to the next level and be able to work on those needs being met. And if those needs aren't being met after transcending to that level, then she's not going to be able to transcend to that next level. And then she's never going to be able to reach the point of self-actualization because her basic essential needs were never being met. So again, this episode doesn't really provide us with enough details to be able to actually make a good assumption on how these behaviors could have been prevented. However, we can play the Captain Hindsight routine and basically say, well, the parents could have been more aware. They could have made sure that her basic emotional needs were being met. They could have advocated for her better. But sometimes there's just situations that happen that you have absolutely no control of. And that's the sad reality of real life. That, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's horrible, that life is terrible, but it definitely plays a whole part of, learning how to accept certain things that happen because there wasn't anything that you could have done to prevent it. So, I know this is a short video, but trust me, there's a lot going on, but it'll be all right. So, for the conclusion, parental awareness of signs or symptoms of of something that might be going on, being aware of specific abnormal behavior. This doesn't mean that parents need to be a helicopter or to automatically assume that the worst is happening. This is a great way to open those important conversations with your children. Don't accuse or assume, just give your kids a safe space to be honest. So then that way you can actually have a conversation with them and teach them at the same time without having to chastise them. Because as soon as you start chastising your child, guess what? Their ears switch off. That's just that's just the honest truth. And if their ears switch off, they're not actually going to hear you, and they're going to keep making that same mistake. Instead, you need to level with them, be real with them, and show them that they also have emotions, and those emotions are valid too. Secondly, support. As always, having support in these situations are top tier, top notch. That's what you need to do. 1122. So having a support group is important in these situations, especially to collectively seek closure. In this case, these parents, they're probably going to have a couple of words with with the brother and sister and in-law, because I would be really mad. Like, if one of my in-laws were doing that to my daughter, like, I'd probably be really livid. And to be honest, at the end of the episode, whenever they showed Susan and Richard being arrested and escorted out of the mall, and then it shows like the daughter being wheeled out on a stretcher, and Katie being wheeled out on a stretcher, and the parents with her, like, and the dad just pauses as they were putting his brother in the patrol car, and he just looks at him, and I'm like that is bewildering to me. Like, to be that calm, I'd be saying so many things. But yeah, so as always, if there are questions, comments, suggestions, concerns, anything, drop them in the comments. If you know me personally, DM me wherever you know me, and I would love to hear from you. So I hope you guys enjoyed this pre-recorded session of Inside the Criminal Mind. I promise I'll be back doing a live session probably next week. If not, I will be sure to let you guys know. And don't worry, because these videos, we still have, I think, 3 more episodes. So I can't wait to see you all again soon. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Bye.